Welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast about two guys who watch random movies based on a magic algorithm. I'm Noah Saturn, and with me today, and in this episode, and in every episode, is the Rogers to my Hammerstein, Kyle Wolford.
Hammerstein?
Hammerstein.
Callbacks. What are we watching today?
We are watching Till the Clouds Roll By from 1947, a big old-fashioned MGM musical.
And this movie it's a musical biopic about the life of Jerome Kern.
Who is Jerome Kern? He was a big Broadway pioneer. He's the showboat guy.
He's the showboat guy, and I did look, and I looked at like his whole filmography, and I pretty much know him as the showboat guy. Even though I haven't seen Showboat, I know some of the music, which you'll
People
learn.
know Showboat because it's one of the first very huge, I'd say more modern Broadway hits, post kind of Gilbert and Sullivan comic operas.
Well, before we get into the actual movie, this is directed by Richard Worf. And I looked at his filmography too, and it doesn't look like he did.
He's the Klingon guy from Star Trek, right?
That's what I thought.
He's Worf, yes.
Worf. He didn't direct a lot of movies. He started out in movies, and then he directed a lot of TV. So
okay.
I saw that he did I think I saw on there that he did a bunch of episodes of Gunsmoke. He did a bunch of Beverly Hillbillies. So he did a lot of old TV shows that you've heard of.
This is a story about a man named Jerome
who wrote a song for the Broadway.
Broadway, that is.
Broadway. We're going to California.
California way.
Going from New York to California. Speaking of Showboat, that's where we open up in this movie. We open up in 1927, and it's the opening of Showboat. This is on stage though, so I think Showboat came out several years later on
the film version of Showboat was 1951, but the show was 1927 was when it first premiered on Broadway.
So his other stuff actually came out before that then, because he wasn't around for Showboat then, the movie.
Yeah, he died in 44, 45.
He died during the filming of this movie.
Yeah.
So he did have a little bit input into this movie, and that actually, we'll talk about that after we talk about this whole movie, because there's an interesting fact about some characters that don't exist in real life. But we open up on the opening of Showboat on Broadway in 1927 in New York, and it's a great success. And, like I said, I've never actually seen Showboat, even though I own the movie, so now I need to go back and watch that. But I recognized Can't Help Loving That Man of Mine, or That Man of Mine. That was being sung by Lena Horne in this movie. That's another thing, is there are a lot of celebrity cameos, or, celebrity back then, musical-wise.
Yeah, it actually is kind of cool. It almost has a bit of I'm going to say it's almost like a Marvel movie in the sense where there's other kind of small bit parts from semi-famous people. Or maybe a more closer analogy would be something like The Player from the 90s, which was a movie about a Hollywood big shot, and then it actually had a bunch of real-life Hollywood people show up.
Yeah.
Watch The Player. It's a good movie. It's really funny.
So Lena Horne sings that, and then the other song that everyone's going to recognize, because it actually got a lot of radio play, I believe, way back in the day, was Old Man River.
Which is one of the most famous Broadway songs of all time. People still sing it and still record it to this day.
Although they have changed the lyrics, because the original does use the N-word in there. The N-words are on the ship, yada, yada, yada. Then they changed it to the colored folks. And then there's still that's a little bit, so we people are on the ship. So they gradually changed to get...
It's traditionally sung by a very deep, if you've heard a recording, it's probably by a very deep African American male singer. So
yeah,
a very deep bass.
And yeah,
if you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly that guy's voice.
Exactly. And the thing is the content of the song is, it's about the downtrodden of the slaves and that era and all that, where they're working and the white men are playing on the boat. We're doing all the work, we're picking all the cotton, and then
Old Man River just keeps rolling on.
Yep, and they keep rolling on. They don't
Proud
care.
Mary keeps on rolling.
Proud Mary keeps on rolling. So we're watching Showboat on stage, and it gets a lot of applause. So there's a
They
party
go to the song,
afterwards.
they sing Old Man River, blah, blah, blah.
And then another guy comes and sings another song that I didn't recognize. The thing is like this movie is big. I don't know if there was anything original recorded for this movie.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's more of a jukebox musical. So think of something
Jerome
like
Kern greatest hits.
It's definitely so it's a greatest hits musical. So think of something like Moulin Rouge or Rock of Ages or even like Mamma Mia. Except instead of a fictional story, this was all just by this one composer, so they decided to make it about this composer's life, which is not a bad premise.
And the thing that they don't really go into in this movie, so they don't make it super clear, even though there's one or two bits of dialogue where you kind of get the hint of, oh, he is a composer. He's not writing the lyrics for these songs.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a lot of music for musicals. Someone else wrote the lyrics. One of those someones is Oscar Hammerstein. I still cannot say that movie or that name.
Hammerstein?
Hammerstein.
Oscar Hammerstein.
Yeah, he's the composer for most of this stuff. So we get done watching the show, and he leaves for the party, and he talks to the chauffeur and says, "Hey, why don't you go to my old place where I grew up or whatever?" And then and then I don't know if this is a chauffeur or a taxi, but if it's a taxi, he tells his entire life story. This taxi driver's rich by the end of this movie.
The framing device for the majority of the film is him telling his story to this chauffeur / taxi guy. So if it's a taxi, I assume the meter's been running this entire time. So like 2 hours later, he's done telling his life story, and then it's like, all right, meter's going. Where do you want to go? Should we go to the Waldorf now for our big party that you were supposed to go to 2 hours ago?
Yeah. So he says, oh, I wasn't always this, this big. I was just a young songwriter who wanted to, with a skip and a step and a song in his heart,
or something like that.
And he's in New York, and he goes to Mr. Hessler, who is a songwriter.
Because he's an arranger.
He's an arranger. So he writes. So Kern is trying to write some music, and he wants the arrangement, like where to bring in the flutes, where to bring in.
So an arranger.
brass.
Arrangers are definitely their main job is like they're more or less about they're more transcribing stuff from sort of one setting to another setting. So for example, take a song like AC/DC's Back in Black. It's not originally written for orchestra. An arranger is the kind of person who they take, we've got this and this, we're going to put this on piano, we're going to take this song and now we're going to transcribe it and put it onto a full orchestra or a symphony. I would totally see Back in Black with the full orchestra.
A great example of that is the Metallica S&M album. If you've never heard it, they took all of their greatest hits and set it to Metallica actually sang and they actually played with an orchestra and took all of their greatest hits.
That's pretty awesome.
And put them to orchestra, and they are fantastic. I have that album.
I might have to check
that
up now, if only for...
It is called Metallica S&M.
Okay.
So Symphony and Metallica. Get it?
Yuck, yuck, yuck.
So he goes to find this Mr. Hessler, the songwriter, and Hessler's going, you songwriters and composers,
kids, you don't care about real music.
Doing shows. This
You
is a
just
real
want to
business.
make a silly little song so you can make money, dang nabbit.
I'm gonna write a symphony.
I'm gonna write real music.
Well, but you can stay in and eat some roast beef anyway.
Since you're here. He's very hospitable for a grumpy man.
He is.
So he's got a maid and he's got
a little daughter. Who, probably about 10, 11, 12 years old.
Sure.
Around there.
Precocious age.
She's very precocious. And she's, a musician too, because her daddy's a genius.
Red hair, and I was just going to call her Little Orphan Annie for the rest of this.
Little Orphan Annie.
There's a bald guy there who has a ton of money.
Who is Sally?
Daddy Warbucks is not there.
We'll put the real name out, like the character's name is Sally. But Little Orphan Sally.
Little Orphan Sally, sure.
See, now you got me. Sally, Allie, Annie, blah.
And all these shows run together. So then Jean Valjean steals a loaf of bread.
And we go down on a different boat.
Yes.
So she comes in, and I don't know if Mr. Hessler's like doing the dishes or something with his maid, because then Kern goes over to the piano and starts playing a song.
Plunking away at a song.
Oh, hey, you want to hear my song, little girl? Let's play this. And oh, I like that. Well, then Hessler hears it and goes, oh, wait a minute, you might have something
This
there.
is actually good. And then, of course,
And then there's a montage.
also the song is named Kahlua. So, and then actually I actually really enjoyed this little scene where they're sort of arranging this, and then, but so while they're kind of writing down, they're playing different parts. Like, so Sally's playing one piano that's just the main chorus, and then someone else is playing, and like Jerome is playing the piano. It's supposed to be this is supposed to be the brass, this is supposed to be the flute, these are the clarinets. And I really enjoyed this scene because when they're talking about, okay, no, this is where you bring this part, so they would hum a line, and then the music would actually bring in these orchestral parts.
And the thing is, it wasn't just the non-diegetic.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually, Hessler was in the middle of Kern and his daughter. And when they were playing, he's going, well, can you hear the strings here? And they're both looking at him like he's crazy. But then we're hearing what Hessler's hearing in his mind. I agree. That was, the way it was played out was really cool.
More movies should do that. That was pretty neat.
So they're playing that song, and then all of a sudden they do like this montage sequence of becoming friends, and then we cut to Kern is living with the Hesslers now. Like
I guess
it just kind of happened. But
then, I want to point out that the song being named Kahlua just kind of stuck with me because when I was very young, I had a dog named Kahlua.
Oh,
which, Kahlua, of course, being the place in Hawaii, but then also more commonly, I guess, what I would recognize as Kahlua being the kind of coffee liqueur, so an alcohol. So because of that, I was like 2 years old and we had a dog named Kahlua, and originally there were two of them. There was Brandy and Kahlua, which were from my parents, and clearly, that was from, they got the dogs before they had kids. So I always thought that was kind of funny.
Oh, cool. So Kahlua the dog forms this
bond. She
was
a good dog, too. Anyway.
Forms this bond between Hessler and Kern. Kern moves in, and eventually Hessler wants to write a symphony, so he moves off to London and says, hey, do you want my house? Kern goes, sure, I'll stay here and write. Is that how that works? You just, take this.
I assume, he gets it to him, or he still, maybe like Hessler still owns the place, but Jerry's paying Jerome, or Jerry's just paying rent. That's the way he keeps the rent control, because, with, Manhattan prices are just...
Yeah, that's true. So Kern is staying by himself, and he's getting all lonely, and he can't find work because apparently at this time, this is before Showboat came out in 27, so this is like probably in the teens? Or even
early teens. I'm going to say like the 1900s.
And
so
nobody wants American writers. Everyone in Broadway wants, like, English writers are the best.
Mm-hmm.
So Hessler or Kern decides that he needs to write some music with an English accent. I didn't know you could write music like you just write. I didn't know you could write in an accent.
Well,
although I suppose you can.
Maybe. Well, there is this. So the big hotshot producer is this dude named Charles Fromer. Jerry goes, hey, I'm a songwriter. I want to talk to you. But first, there's like a goofy misunderstanding that I thought he was like, some janitor or something. Oh, it's finally time you got here. Oh, you've been expecting me. He's like, no, I'm a songwriter. Oh, shrug.
Yeah, and Froman doesn't even talk to him because this was like his secretary outside or something. He's like, well, no, you're an American. He's not going to listen to you. So he decides to go to London, and he lives with Hessler.
And he goes with his old pal Jim, and their daughter Lucy, and their maid, what's-her-face.
So he goes there to, like, learn British culture or whatever, and learn how to write with an English accent.
And how's the symphony going, Jim? Jim hasn't done anything.
I don't know how he has such big... Well, then he was successful before. So
probably
he probably just has money.
Arranging or whatever, he invested well.
So they go off to the fair because, that's where you get your ideas. Mm-hmm. And he has an idea. He sees this giant swing set.
People on a swing. It's like, think of it, Jim. What if we had huge girls on the stage singing and they're on a swing?
Well, a huge swing on stage, not huge girls.
Girls on the huge swing. I don't know. It could be like, they all have to be like WNBA players, like 6'3" and above.
Just monstering over everyone. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, we could have the swing like going out over the crowd while someone's singing. And so somehow they get this on stage. And what was that called?
Because there was this, it was kind of a part of vaudeville, because vaudeville was they would just go to a stage show. kind of a variety show. So think something like Saturday Night Live.
So he'd get one song on
So he
there.
would get a song on there, then they go off stage, someone else comes on, then maybe like a comedian would come on, or like some other like Charlie Chaplin type character or whatever. Then they'd come back and then there'd be a different song. So this is very common back in the day.
Yes.
As I was totally there.
Totally. And we get the giant swing going out over everybody, and this is another one of our little cameos because Angela Lansbury gets on stage and starts singing, "How'd you like to spoon with me?"
In a very pronounced sort of almost someone's gonna say Cockney accent.
Yeah, and the thing is I guess she had done a couple movies before this where she actually has a singing voice. I mean, she goes on to become Mrs. Potts.
Yep, and so Angela Lansbury, who's been on Broadway, she's just had a crazy, incredible career. She was the original Mrs. Lovett in the first production, the Broadway production of Sweeney Todd. So she's the kind of person who's been everywhere and done everywhere. And she started out when she was like 19 in the 40s. Her first film is, I want to say 43, 44. So she was still super young at this time. But her first movie was an adaptation of the Portrait of Dorian Gray, which is another pretty good movie. So then she's got like a small part in that one.
Okay, because this came out in 47, so she must have done a couple musicals before this, because I was reading that she actually did a couple musicals where they dubbed over her voice even though she can sing.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said the only way she's going to do this movie is if they use her singing voice.
That's cool.
And I thought it was great because I thought she did great with the song.
Yep.
And she's a good singer. I like her voice.
Sure, she's been a good singer for a very long time.
And who doesn't love Angela Lansbury?
And I assume after this scene, she went back home to Maine to solve another murder.
Yes, and she wrote about it.
Yes.
Frohman happens to be in London at the time, and he loves How'd You Like to Spoon With Me? And he thinks, oh, it's such an English number.
Oh, I love it. It's something British about it. So then it's like, hey, I gotta
Who wrote this?
And then he goes and he meets a composer. Oh, I'm not the composer. I'm just the bartender, something like that.
Yeah.
You're actually looking for him. And then he meets Jerome Kern again, but Jerry obviously recognizes him. Frohman doesn't recognize Jerry, so that's kind of funny.
So he pretends to be British and like tries his little accent.
Tries to cheat his way.
He's like, we're going out to dinner over here, whatever. And Kern's like, righto. That's a reference to the text I sent you earlier today.
Of course, that makes sense. I missed that.
And so he gets in with Frohman, who thinks he's an Englishman, but he's like, whatever.
So he's composing more songs. Life is going okay.
And this is a great little scene too, because then they cut to the next day or whatever, and Hessler and Kern are riding their bike down the street, and Kern gets a flat tire.
It was just I assumed that he was. Oh, did he also ride Bicycle Built for Two? This would be a great segue to it, but apparently that's not. I was expecting that too. I was kind of bummed.
He gets a flat tire, and Hessler goes into town because he's like, well, you're not going to go and try and do your English accent there. I'm just going to go. And so he's waiting around, and he sees a house.
And he's kind of working on a tune. He's got it in his head, and he sees a house. House has a piano. This kind of goes into house and starts working on the piano.
He just walks in, and then because the lady turns out to be her name is Eva,
a lovely lady who also happens to live there.
Yeah, she comes out of the garden, Eva, and she comes out of the garden and comes in. It's like, oh well, I just saw your piano there, and
apparently
I decided to
in
play.
England at that time, that was just a thing.
I saw your piano inside, and I thought, well, nobody's around, so I'll just walk in and play it. Well, he falls in love with her instantaneously. And he tells her that he's the one who wrote the spooning song. And she's like, oh, everybody loves that song, but I don't believe you. So he says, I'm going to write a song about you and give you tickets
and it's going to get on stage, dang nabbit. And by God, he does. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, he gets her tickets. And then they go out on a date, and they're out on the river and go on a picnic.
Oh, they got a nice gondola thing in the English countryside, so
And so he's falling in love, and then Frohman says, you got to go to New York and write some more songs.
You got to do more stuff for me, man. But it's like, oh, he's in love, so then they argue with Hessler. Oh, you got to do so. So they go back to New York to follow Frohman, so then they can finally get their next big gig going.
Well, and it's funny, on the boat, Kern is like, well, he's going to find out I'm not English anymore. And Frohman comes up to them on the boat, and he goes, I never believed you were an Englishman, at least not after even the first 15 minutes. So there you go. He knew he was American. And so Kern and Hessler are. Then we cut to a couple weeks later because Kern and Hessler are supposed to be writing these songs.
They're kind of desperately working on
and
this.
they're like 3 weeks late already.
And then Froman has lost interest or whatever, so he's going to go back to England.
Oh, and here's where history comes in.
But before that, there's like, oh, wait a minute. What do we do? He's going to go back to England. But then they're like, have a
We
party.
got to catch the boat.
What if I get on that boat too? So he'll be stuck with me, and I'll have to work with me for that long amount of time.
Well, he didn't make it to the boat in time.
The traffic is like making to the boat. They see Froman. Kern sees Froman leave the boat, and then
they pan out.
Then there's pan out to the sign, and the boat's name is the Lusitania.
Oh.
Which was sunk in the 19-teens by a German sub, and that was one of the factors that brought the U.S. into World War I. So I thought I didn't see that coming. I did not.
No, I didn't either. That was kind of sad actually. He still sold the music though for a play called Oh Boy.
But this is so then there's this kind of this sad moment where it's like, oh well, that was kind of our big chance.
That was our big break. Yeah.
And now what are we supposed to do? And then this other producer comes by to their office whose name was like Edwards or something.
I didn't write down the name of that next person.
Yeah, Victor Herbert is this other producer who may or may not be real. I don't know.
Because he was the one that said, oh, Froman loved your stuff, so we're still going to do this.
Yeah, we're still going to do this. So then they get together and they finally write their first musical called Oh Boy.
And this is where we get the title of the movie. Cause,
this title song, Till the Clouds Roll By, this blah, blah, blah. I assume we'll be singing in the rain till the clouds roll by.
Something like that. They're carrying umbrellas and
they do it. It's sort of a nice Broadway, pretty standard musical number.
All the musical numbers are actually great in this. I actually like his music, and the dancing is great. So that part where we get to see all the little stage productions of all these different things. So it's not like one musical where you're getting a lot of the same stuff. You're getting like a variety of music with a variety of sets. It feels
like a jukebox musical version of like a 40s musical.
Yeah, exactly. So Oh Boy becomes successful, and then Kern decides to go back to England to marry Eva.
He still loves Eva. So he goes back to England. And like, oh.
And then we see their next show, Leave It to Jane.
He goes back to England. They get married.
The girl
get married, comes back, cute scene, couple cute scenes, like a cutesy argument. Oh, well, I'm a proper person. I can't go out and do this with you. Oh, what if a proper person proposed to you? Would you say no because it's proper? That's kind of a fun scene.
Oh, that's right.
Robert Walker, I think who's played Kern. I forget who. I didn't write down who plays Eva.
Dorothy Patrick, who I don't know, but she was great.
They both have good chemistry. This movie. Yeah. People put it all in there. Put their all in this movie. This is a good movie.
I like Robert Walker a lot.
Robert Walker, he was very charming, very charismatic.
Yeah, so the proposal scene was actually really cute. Their little banter back and forth about like the differences between American and British proposals. So they get married and they do the next show, Leave It to Jane, and I thought this one was funny just because the song in it was all like proper English, and except the girl keeps singing about Cleopatra instead of
Cleopatra.
Yeah, instead of Cleopatra, and they're not. And I
think that's kind of a New York thing.
And I would understand it if they were trying to rhyme it with something else, but no, they were just saying Cleopatra.
Okay, so I guess that's an interesting creative choice that they made.
Yeah. Then we get.
So then there's this. So we see this whole musical number with Cleopatra, and I just kept thinking of King Tut by
Steve Martin.
So I don't know.
Because she did a lot of the little Egyptian
dancing thing. So
it was a cute number.
It was okay. I mean, it's not great.
It wasn't the best number in this movie, but it was fun little dance bit. Then after this, we start getting into this whole thing where, another little montage sequence of more American writers are on Broadway. So, this is starting to spread and people are like, oh, Americans can write too? Then he has his next show, Sally, and this one has a big star of the time in it. And it's actually Marilyn Miller,
but played by
another big star,
Judy Garland. So
apparently Judy Garland was early in her marriage with Vincente Minnelli.
Vincent Minnelli.
Is it just Vincent Minnelli?
Yeah.
Okay. Early in their marriage, and she was actually pregnant with Liza at this time, and Vincent Minnelli directed a lot of her scenes.
Sure. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So she plays this big star Marilyn Miller, and
she sings a song from this show. They have her sing a song about washing dishes or something.
Yeah.
She doesn't, obviously, for whatever reason, she doesn't dance in this film. It's like, well, that's weird. How come she doesn't dance?
Maybe it's because she's pregnant.
Okay.
And she doesn't show a lot, so I don't know how pregnant she was because she wasn't hiding the whole time.
But she was at least this song sequence was from the waist up.
Yeah. So after she does that scene and we introduce Marilyn Miller, this actress, then we go into Kern is like looking at his scrapbook, going, "Oh, I never thought I'd have a scrapbook, but like
this is a little older, a little grayer."
It's a newer version of a montage where he's looking at the scrapbook to signify the passing of time and new shows are coming and going. And then we get far enough now where the little girl Sally is older now and she's coming home from college and she just quit because this is like her third time quitting college.
Something like that.
And she goes to Kern first instead of her dad because she tries to smooth talk Uncle Kern into.
Oh, come on! I want to be
Uncle
in the
Jerry.
show. I want to be in the show.
Yeah. So smooth talks Uncle Jerry into putting her in Broadway, and then they're in this giant mansion. And Hessler and Kern is talking to Hessler, and Hessler goes, "Well, I just want Sally to finish her education. I didn't get a chance to finish mine." And I want to go, "Well, you're not doing too bad for not finishing it."
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Then we go to he writes a song.
He talks his way into it, so that he's kind of being here to have like a small song in her own show or in his next show.
It's gonna be a song called Sunny, and she sings the song and she's great. She's got a great voice and everything. And then she learns the hard lesson in showbiz.
Because while she's singing the song, we have a shot of them listening to her from the seats. And Kern is there with Marilyn Miller. And then I assume the person who's like the producer, the director of the show is like, "Oh, the song is great. This is a good song. But what if we turn this into more of a stage number? Like a big production number as opposed to just a solo song?" It's like, "Well, I don't know. I wrote it for her." It's like, "Well, it's better for the show." Yeah, you're right. So then, unfortunately, and then of course we go to Sally's dressing room.
Well, and not only give it a big production number, but give it to
Judy
Marilyn.
Garland,
Judy, Marilyn. So they're all like, "Who wants to tell Sally?" And Kern's like, "I don't want to tell her." The other guy's like,
probably
"Well,
should though.
You should tell her because you know her well." And he's like, "I don't want to tell her because I know her well. I wrote the song for her." So Judy is like good-natured. Marilyn Miller is all like, "Well, I'll go tell her." So she goes to tell Sally, and then Sally runs away because she's upset. Meanwhile, her dad is sick, and I don't think she knows that.
He's getting older, he's getting sick. So then, like, oh, yeah, I know it's sad. And then we actually do get to see that production number with Judy Garland singing, and then there's like elephants and horses. This is a very crazy, elaborate number.
Yeah, it went from like a solo to like one of the biggest production numbers in this movie. So Hessler's sick. Sally runs away after all that, and then Kurt and Hessler have like a touching little deathbed chat. Where he's all like, Sally's gone, go find her.
And she left me this note, so then they hire private detectives. They're looking for her. There's nothing. And then, the time goes on. Hessler gets older. He gets sicker. They talk to the deathbed. And then Hessler dies.
Yeah. And then Kern kind of goes into a funk. And this is when Oscar...
Sad. More time passes. Can't really write anything. Sad. And then, one day, Oscar comes over.
Oscar Hammerstein. He comes by with a book that he wants music written for. He says, "I need someone to compose some music. I'll write the lyrics." We don't see the book. He's just handing the book, and then Kern's like, "I can't do this. I'm looking for Sally," and he sets the book down, and then
you see, of course, the book is Showboat.
Oh, we're getting towards the end of the movie, aren't we? Eventually, we find Sally singing in the Elite Club in Memphis.
And then they're having kind of a nice number. He actually, I think it might have been the same song, or it was like a different song that Jerome Kern also wrote, that she's singing, dancing around this club, and dances with like the band leader or whatever.
Yeah, and it's a different arrangement and everything, because she's even like, "Oh, I hope you're not mad, like what I did with the music or whatever." He's like, "Oh no." Well, when she sings this song though, the band leader in the club is another small cameo from back in the day, Van Johnson.
So I think this movie is kind of cool. There's a little bit of a who's who going on in some of these places. So, and this was kind of definitely in the middle of kind of the big musicals or huge
40s
era,
and 50s.
40s, 50s musicals era. So this was 47 to put, I believe 46, if I remember correctly, was Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland, and then 51 or 52, early 50s was Singing in the Rain. This is sort of kind of in that same wheelhouse, just to put it there.
Yeah, I believe Singing in the Rain is 52.
Yes.
which, by the way, is one of my all-time favorite movies ever made, period. So highly recommend that one.
Oh yeah.
An interesting fact about this, though, in the era of these big musicals, was I believe this is the first live-action film musical that had the film soundtrack released also on 78 RPM.
Interesting.
It's the first film soundtrack released for a live musical.
That's cool.
Or live film musical, because they'd had original Broadway
recordings, but this is sort of the movie musical version.
There was a soundtrack recorded before this for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but that was like just for an animated movie. There was a soundtrack to go along with it, and this was the first film musical soundtrack. So yeah, Van Johnson is the leader of the band club, the band leader at the club. You might know him from like Brigadoon. There's actually a lot of ties to Brigadoon in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Because Sid Charisse is dancing in here somewhere, and she's also in Brigadoon. And I think that there was somebody else in here, because Van Johnson has a role in Brigadoon, and there might be someone like either a production or another actor that was also tied to Brigadoon.
You know, you really think about it, the only thing that this movie was really missing are cameos from Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly.
Yeah.
Like the two people that aren't in this movie.
That's true. Fred Astaire who was it? Ginger Rogers?
Fred and Ginger made 10 movies together.
So-
Famous for stuff like Swing Time, Top Hat.
Because we didn't get Ginger
Yeah.
in here either.
Mhm.
So no Fred and Ginger, and no Fred,
No Gene Kelly.
no Gene Kelly. We did get dancing, people dancing in the rain with umbrellas.
Yeah, almost. Not quite Gene Kelly.
They were not Gene Kelly, no.
There's only one Gene Kelly. You know that Gene Kelly actually pretty much was his own choreographer?
Oh yeah?
Yeah. He's kind of, when you look at, that's pretty insane.
Well,
Insanely talented.
I don't know. I believe that I've also heard that he was also hard to work with, though.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was very talented, but apparently hard to work with.
Truly a legend. Anyway.
Yeah, so then we've got Kern leaves the club, and he's like, Sally's okay, and she had found out the news that her father had passed away, so she knows, and he's like, okay, I just wanted to make sure you're all right. And then he walks up to the river, and you hear in the background, this time you get in the score just starts playing the melody for Old Man River as he's like looking.
He looks in at the river boats going down in Memphis.
Yeah.
As I'm walking in Memphis. I'm
I'm
walking in Memphis. Anyway.
Another great album. Mark Cohn, self-titled album, one of my favorite albums. Then we cut back to the present day, and that chauffeur/taxi driver, I really hope it's just a chauffeur, because, man, he owes a lot of money. And he goes, well, that's my story. and then we cut to this. This is where it's like, oh, let's give all the other
this sled, and it says Rosebud on it, and a slow zoom out, right? It's a sled.
This is where it's like, well, what numbers haven't we fit into this movie that Jerome Kern has written? And so we get a montage of more of his hits and kind of like little stage productions. And then they go into just individuals singing different songs. And
more montages, more fun, big production numbers, standard 40s musical stuff.
And I didn't recognize a lot of it, except I didn't realize he wrote Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, which is a really good song. And I just didn't realize that was one that he had written. So we go through this whole montage of how he went from Broadway to Hollywood, because now he's starting to do music for movies. And MGM gets this newcomer to come and sing one of his songs.
Because the setup is that, okay, we want you to come to the sound stage or whatever, so we can sing this for you and see what you think, because we're filming this big scene for some of your songs, and now we've got sort of this first song to deliver this song of yours before, kind of as a framing device for this whatever movie they're making.
Yeah, and who's this newcomer to Hollywood? It's Sally!
Who somehow made her way out from the club. So that was kind of a nice reveal towards the end of the film.
Yeah, so we get like a little reunion with them, so, they probably go on to be a happy family in Hollywood or whatever. And then we go into another montage of songs, because that's what this is about, is just showcasing
it's a jukebox musical.
It's because you find out that about none of this is true, other than the fact that Jerome Kern is a person who wrote all these songs.
Yes.
And it ends with another cameo, Mr. Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra.
This is the 1940s Frank Sinatra. So this is like super, super young Frank Sinatra. I didn't recognize his face at first.
I did not either. And I went because I saw in the credits before I watched the movie, I go, oh, Frank Sinatra is also in this movie. And I finished the movie, I go, where was Frank Sinatra Sinatra, and I looked it up, and they said, oh, he sang Old Man River there. I go, wait a minute. So I rewound back to the Old Man River, which he sings really well because he's Frank Sinatra, but he's got these really, really young face and this goofy hair that just kind of like is sticking up. Terrible hair.
Well, yeah, because normally you always see Frank Sinatra with the hat, especially in his later years, because he was starting to go bald. But
and maybe he started wearing a hat because his hair was terrible. His goofy hair. Well, so then of course, it's Frank Sinatra, so I don't know how big because this was young Frank Sinatra, so I don't know how big he was, but they ended the movie on him.
So, I suppose that means something.
Yeah.
But this is, I think, kind of before the Rat Pack really got together.
Yeah, it had to have been. And they're framing the whole movie with Old Man River, which is probably Jerome Kern's biggest song.
I mean, even back then, people still know Old Man River now. No, I think Frank did a great job because he's Frank Sinatra, but honestly, I didn't think the song was, because, Frank Sinatra is a white guy. Yeah. But Old Man River has always traditionally been sung by
the deep black voice.
Sort of a deep African-American, very soulful voice.
Yeah.
So, I kind of wish it would have ended with someone like a different performer, but, whatever. Frank Sinatra's, it's just Frank Sinatra. He's just fine. So
he does all right.
So I didn't feel like he quite had the register to get to those super low
No,
notes.
He doesn't.
He's definitely... He's kind of more in the baritone range, but...
Yeah. So this whole movie is about Jerome Kern and his, it's more about his rise from, beginner all the way up to Hollywood. So his going through his Broadway phase. And the thing is that it's also really about his relationship with this Hessler guy and his daughter. And
they have some of the best parts of the movie. It's sort of the dialogue between them.
And then the relationship between him and the daughter, it's like family to him and everything.
Yeah, she calls him Uncle Jerry for almost the entire movie.
And then there's the big surprise that she's the newcomer in Hollywood to do one of his songs. The Hesslers are completely fictional.
They're made up. They're just made up.
They don't exist. So half of the story of this movie, just by proxy, is completely made up because the characters were made up because I was reading that, and who knows how much this is true, but we know that the Hesslers definitely are fictional, but they said that Kern, who was alive at the time that they were starting this movie, they asked him if they could do a movie on his life, and he said, well, my life has been pretty boring, so you're going to have to spruce it up a little bit. So apparently they spruced it up by giving him an entirely new best friend.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. If they made a movie about my life and then they gave me a fictional best friend played by The Rock.
That would actually be kind of cool.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. So this is mostly fictional, so don't take any of this as real gospel.
But you know what? Here's what I say to that, though. Is it's a musical. It's showcasing the music. This is kind of like the argument that we got with a lot of critics and people who hated The Greatest Showman because they're like, that's not really what he was like. And I just want to scream, it's a musical with great music and a great message. The historical accuracy, I don't go to movies for historical accuracy. I like to learn a little bit about it.
It depends on the marketing of the film. So if you're going to say something like Selma, where this is, it was very much marketed as a biopic about Martin Luther King Jr.
If it is strictly a biopic, then I do expect some semblance of the truth in there. But if it's a musical, even if it's a biopic musical, it's got to be more about the music because it's a musical. And the music numbers have to catch me in a music. And this did. I don't need to see all of his movies because I've seen his greatest hits. And that's actually one thing I'll have to say about this is if you don't want to run through his entire filmography and you've heard of Jerome Kern, but you're like,
if you've heard of Showboat.
Or if you've heard of Showboat and you're like, oh, well, there's some good songs in that. Go, what else has he done? Watch this movie.
As a jukebox musical, it does what it set out to do. It's just sort of a fun little celebration of the music of Jerome Kern, the Broadway composer.
I agree. So overall, I'm gonna give this I like to give a caveat for a lot of things, but if you're into 40s and 50s musicals in that era, I would recommend this. This is not top of the line. It's middle of the road.
This is something you want to watch on a Sunday afternoon where you've had a late breakfast or an early lunch and you're just kind of hanging out and not doing much.
But as someone who is a fan of those old musicals, I really dug this movie. I thought they did well. Even though the story was fictional between him and Hessler, I loved that relationship, and I thought that Van Heflin, who played Wade Hessler and Robert Walker had a great relationship. And then even, like you said, the relationship between Robert Walker and Dorothy Patrick, their chemistry as the husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Kern. There was a lot of good chemistry between the actors in this.
Yeah, very well acted, well written. Music was great. Very much just a good kind of straight down the middle of the road of these kind of movies. But I do want to note that this, if you can find like a DVD copy or like maybe a Blu-ray copy or something, because the transfer we watched of this film on Amazon Prime was just garbage.
Yeah, it kind of was. There was actually 2 copies of this.
Yeah.
One of them actually had the 1947 date on it. One said like 1994. I'm going, did someone like download it on 1994 off or 96 off of a VHS or something? In both versions, because I lost the one and I did a search again and I just clicked on the other one to watch the end of the movie because I hadn't quite finished it yet, and they were both of the same quality. So it's not like one was
like middle VHS quality, and it tells and you want this movie to look good, but this version on Amazon Prime, if you can find a better version, I would definitely do that, because this movie, just because there's a lot of love, they put a lot of love, it deserves to be seen in a better form than like a crappy VHS someone put on YouTube, which is pretty much the equivalent of what we saw on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, and if you don't want to go out and just blind buy it, I am going to say go check this movie out. And even if you have to watch the Amazon Prime version, if that's what you have, watch it and then decide from there. Because this has got a lot of great cameos. I mean, you get Judy Garland, you get Angela Lansbury, you get Frank Sinatra, Sid Charisse dancing, you get Lena Horne.
There's a lot of this movie.
And that's a lot of good singing with good music. Mm-hmm. So, that mix is well worth it. I actually can't believe I've never heard of this movie before.
I mean, I can, because it doesn't necessarily stand out. This is not a Guys and Dolls or American Curse
or a Singing in the Rain.
Or a Singing in the Rain. This is not one of those. It's the middle of the road. This is closer even On the Town, I think, is a little bit more interesting than this movie. But
yeah. Well, and maybe it got a bad rap also because it really isn't.
It's a jukebox musical.
And it's a jukebox musical, and also half of it is fictional. And people are like, well, because I was like Googling a bunch of articles about this, and there was one site that they wrote, how not to learn about Jerome Kern. Nice. Watch Till the Clouds Roll By.
That's really funny.
I was like, well, you at least learn what music he composed. Although, like I said, it's a little misleading because they never really emphasize the fact that he's a composer and he doesn't actually write the music until they get to Showboat, where he's where Hammerstein is like, I said it right that time.
I'm proud of you, son.
Hammerstein says, I'm going to write the lyrics. So, but again, good movie. So it's a recommend.
All right. Anyway, so we're at our next. Now we're going to, at the end, we'll do what we do at the end of every show and find out what on earth we're going to watch next. So we've got our spin. What genre do we have today, Kyle?
I think we're going to go for a horror. We haven't done a horror movie yet.
I'm going to be spooked.
Are you?
I am ready to be spooked.
You're ready to be spooked. I didn't know. I don't know your movie taste quite yet, so I didn't know if you were like one of those that's a little squeamish with horror.
I mean, to quote Beetlejuice, I've seen The Exorcist over 130 times, and it gets funnier. Keeps getting funnier every time I see it. Anyway.
Every single time I see it. Spin that wheel.
Oh, we got Dead Time, a horror thriller from 2012, rated 2.2. On IMDb.
It's only an hour and 37 minutes.
Okay,
though.
And I just want to point. Let's look at this stuff.
The box cover. Heads will rock and roll.
And so it's got a guitar, and then the guitar neck is actually someone's hand with the strings on it.
It's like a severed arm is the neck. A Birmingham-based band are ordered by their unhappy record company to an old warehouse. The goal being to restart
their ailing careers with a kick-ass new promo video. Unfortunately, the band and their entourage find themselves targets of a mysterious knife-wielding maniac haunted by the voice of Satan and out for revenge.
Okay, and you know what? Anybody can watch this who has internet connection because this is on Popcorn Flicks and Vudu.
These are some of the weirder free ones. I mean,
I've watched movies on Vudu before. Vudu is a place where you're going to go and you're going to get commercials in there, but
Mhm.
there are very few commercials. It's like 30
And
to a minute.
I think of Vudu as like a place where you go get your free digital copy of a movie. You can buy a Blu-ray of something. So if you buy a Blu-ray of like Black Panther or whatever,
Oh,
like
okay.
reading your digital copy, that's where you go to Vudu or something like that.
So, but you can watch a lot of free movies on there too, and you just have to watch them with ads. So
So
Voodoo and Popcorn Flicks, Dead Time.
Dead Time.
Go watch it. We're going to.
I guess so.
And until next time,
I'm Noah Saturn, and he's Kyle Mulford.
goodbye.
Goodbye.